morning, everyone. It's Louisa Munson from Feel Good Astrology with another cracking Feel Good conversation. I'm joined once again by my good dear friend, beautiful man, absolutely full of wisdom, and I'm really looking forward to some of his sharings today. It's beautiful, Rick Pursell. Rick, come and join us. Hello, how are you?
Hello, and thank you for all those kind words. And I hope you are recovering well from feeling poorly the other week.
Yes, almost back to normal. Yes, it has been noticed that we haven't been on as regularly as normal. Let me just turn my Facebook off. I don't want that beeping in the background. That's not very professional, is it? Yeah, it's been noticed that we haven't been doing these as regularly as usual. And just to, in transparency, we've both been ill at you first and then me. And then there's all these other little bits and pieces going on because obviously we're doing this on top of our normal working days, aren't we?
Yes. And life does get in the way sometimes.
Boy, does it get in the way. Oh my goodness. Let me just put a banner on the bottom just to show people that, it's okay to join us in the chat room. In fact, we love it when that happens, don't we?
We do. It's lovely to get some feedback and know that you're there and you haven't gone to sleep.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people in my time zone probably aren't joining us at this moment.
Right.
Because, it's quite early. I wouldn't be up at this time if it wasn't for my regular meetup with you.
Well, I'm glad you are.
Yeah, well, at the bottom it says, "How are you today? Who's been driving you?" So that's a reference to our title today, Rick. Who's driving? Where should we start with this? Because this is all about the, it's about the fight, the eternal fight between ego and authentic self, right?
No, I thought it was about car drivers and bus drivers and train drivers.
It could be. I was feeling quite driven this morning when I woke up and saw in my feed. There's a few different Facebook threads going on, and I don't tend to, I don't go onto other people's timelines to bollock them about why I think they're failing by my expectations, my judgments. I do sometimes get people do that to me, though not so much. But one of my friends is being really panned at the moment because she's put something that appears against the narrative. And I felt myself being very driven today. She kind of tagged me in as if to say, help just for a moment, because she knows I share, like a similar thing. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because what I'm noticing at the moment is we're all being very driven at the moment. There's some very strong narratives going on, which would appear to inflame us and really kind of get our personal upsets flowing fast and furious. Again, another driving reference. So where do you want to start on this massive?
Right. Yes, it is. It is a big subject, and you're right. Let's start with a familiar phrase I quote very often: "Crisis is the driver of change."
Oh, that's so good.
So wherever there's crisis, there is inevitably change at the end, and sometimes it can be not so good and sometimes other, but there is change. So we're going through these unprecedented changes at the moment, and everything that we could rely on is being dismantled. Our freedoms, our freedom of speech, what we can do, where we can go, things like that. So that's curbing some of our freedoms. And as infinite beings having a human experience, what do you think an infinite being doesn't want the most?
Yeah, well, I absolutely know that if someone tries to curb my freedoms, my hand goes up in defiance, and I want to go like this in their face.
Yes.
Lots of hand gestures and potential for swearing.
Yeah, we want to be free. We want to be able to express ourselves openly. We want to be able to share our opinions without getting slaughtered. And when that's stifled, there is a need that's not being met. And whenever one of our needs is not being met, it's met with irritable behaviors, and then it can get antagonistic and get aggressive, finish up in violence and finish up in wars. These are unmet needs. And of course, the needs have to be realistic and harmless. But right now, we're seeing a lot of people's needs are not being met, especially here in Bali. The economy has been decimated over the last 2 years. So what happens is that when our needs are not being met, we tend to get triggered very easily because we're already on this knife edge. We're not comfortable with what's going on. We're pushed out of our comfort zone, and it tends to be trigger an adverse reaction or an oppositional reaction. And this is the modus operandi of the ego, right? So what gets triggered is our stuff, right? And I'm being polite. There's another word that could be used, but I won't.
You can't say it. That's fine.
Shit. Let's call a spade a spade.
Our
shit gets triggered.
It's real.
Now,
our shit gets real.
The natural tendency is the ego wants to make me right and the other person wrong, right? And vice versa. So we have to defend our perspective. We have to pretend that I am right, whether we are or not. So what happens is that people get triggered by other people and circumstances, situations, the weather, nature. A storm can spoil a good picnic. So we get triggered. And the question we have to always ask ourselves is, whose stuff is this that's been triggered? Whose irritability is this that's been triggered? And of course, if we take responsibility for that, we'll say, well, it's mine. Yes, but they did it. No, we got triggered by our own stuff. They were the triggering influence. And it may have been caused by their stuff as well. That was their reaction to something. So their reaction has caused a reaction in us. And the fairly human thing to do is to push back, right? So now we done this before. Here's the inner conflict. A force versus another force, an intention versus another intention, a perspective or viewpoint or opinion versus another opinion. And if we keep pushing, there'll just a build-up of pressure. So how we deal with this, first of all, is to very responsibly say, whoa, just back off a moment, rather than reacting with anger or antagonism or righteousness or whatever it is, to just think, whoa, I've just been triggered. This person has triggered me, but they're not responsible for what is being triggered. That's my stuff. So that's the first step. And so now we're looking at, to what degree do we get triggered in an average day? So what we're trying to establish here.
That's a very good question, isn't it? What do you think the average is?
I don't dare say. And it depends on where you are. So if we want to determine who's driving us, we've got to know what is the impulse, what is the response or reaction. So the ego reacts. It reacts by, first of all, separating itself from whatever has caused the triggering, right? That's the first thing that goes wrong. We're separate from it. When we know that ultimately we're connected and everything is connected, everything. But we withdraw enough to say, no, I'm separate. It's your fault, or you did this, or you caused me this, or whatever. And that's not taking responsibility, and we've separated. And then it goes downhill from there.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah. So that's the reaction of the ego reacts and the heart responds. So the ego reacts to that. And of course, what happens is the person who's the recipient of that then generally reacts. And we got two reactions going. And this starts the cycle of violence. Somebody has got to stop this. Right? Somebody's got to have the courage and humility to stop stop pouring this reaction. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just about to say, a bit like my first instinct is to go like this. And to show and to show defiance rather than just like listening, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's very natural. Yeah, and we've been brought up like that. You know, my generation is born at the end of the last war, has personally been in the Vietnam War. Then we had the Middle East War. We've had wars going all over the world, or skirmishes or whatever. And that's the adversarial oppositional perspective. So we've grown up on that. We watch, I don't, but we have boxing matches designed to flatten somebody's face and put them flat out on the canvas. Cricket, tennis, it's all adversarial. We need to renew our sports so that it's a cooperation of skills rather than I'm going to win and you're going to lose. How can we create a win-win situation so we can still play the game of life, but without somebody having to lose or lose face?
Actually, thinking about it, I am not actually like this in public. Like, actually, what happens normally is I do it on my own. I go, go crazy on my own, and then compose myself. But again, that's still my ego driving me, rather than being calm in that situation. And I'm just being reductive about myself, because obviously I do. I'm also calm. That is also an option. But there's a lot of passive aggressivity, isn't there?
Yes.
And that is also ego, where we pretend to be nice when we might not really be thinking it or feeling it.
Exactly. And you're not alone.
No.
Lots of people will project their stuff onto somebody else, right?
Yeah.
And there's a popular misconception that if I'm hurting and I'm in pain, I've got trauma there and I'm hurting, if I hurt somebody else, it'll make me feel better. So there's the retaliatory aspect that comes in. You've hurt me, I'm going to hurt you because it'll make me feel better. There may be some very, very temporary respite, but it doesn't work. And then you've got this cycle of violence back and forth. What are arguments and skirmishes right up to warfare? So clearly that doesn't work. However,
babe, can I just stop you there?
Yeah, please,
not to be adversarial, but just to welcome a couple of people who've just sent us a couple of messages. So we've got Moaz, who's listened to our show quite a few times before, saying, Bon dia, Louisa y Rick. It's been a very long time. I miss you guys. So I'm not entirely sure where he is at the moment, but we've also got Siri, who's joining us from Norway, saying, hi, good morning. I don't think Siri's watched the show live before. So it might be that she saw it on my feed because she's a couple of hours ahead. So it is like normal morning time for her rather than Sorry. Welcome and thank you for joining us. Rick.
Yes, indeed.
You were saying.
So rather than projecting, the next healthier step is, and if it's coming from the ego, will be judgment. But we're not projecting that judgment. We're not expressing it out. We're just having judgmental thoughts. Because this is the manner of the ego. It's separate. All right. And when we're separate from someone or something or some circumstance, we can cause harm on it, towards it or that person. When we truly love somebody unconditionally, we would never, ever consider harming them. We would not have harmful thoughts, words, or actions. So that separateness is the bane of humanity. Momentarily, we have separated ourselves. And while we're not pushing back and projecting our stuff on somebody else, if we are having, thoughts that are judgmental, then that's, again, it's coming from the ego. And I don't personally know anybody that doesn't have, judgmental thoughts, either about themselves or somebody else or a circumstance. And I'm certainly guilty of it. So that's the next best step. from outwardly expressing the projection onto somebody else. But when we go further than that, if we take full responsibility, this is my stuff, all right?
Mm.
Now, if we have the opportunity at the time, and it may not be appropriate, but just to take a breath and look in and say, okay, I own that, right?
Mm.
I'm not going to project it. I'm just going to deal with it later, and then go and deal with it. Just you're sitting on the bed at the end of the night or whatever, and think, that was really a strong reaction I had. What's in there? What am I reacting? This is my stuff.
Yeah.
What am I reacting, and what's going on here? And the deep dive within to relieve that. Oh, that's exactly how my dad would respond to conflict, or my mum, or my brother, or my uncle. We learned it from somewhere. You know? So it's really about taking responsibility, and then doing the direct self-inquiry to uncover what is the root cause of that. So that's part of the equation. This is the ego. The ego is driving, right? It's driving the separateness. It's driving judgment. It's driving superiority.
It does, yeah.
It's cynicism, criticism. I'm not good enough.
Oh yeah.
Victimhood. They're all coming from one source, and we've talked about this in the past. It's no bigger than a peanut in the left hemisphere. So it's a bunch of cells that we express. The ego is expressed.
That's crazy. It's so small. That's such a big.
Yeah, it is. To think, if you just take our bodies and then put a peanut up here like this, and think, this little sucker has been driving a lot of my behavior.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And how do I want to go about changing that?
Excellent.
Go ahead.
We've got a comment from Moaz, and it looks like quite a big one, so I haven't had a chance to read it. So it's a bit risky just putting it live on the screen. He's answering my question because I said I wasn't entirely sure where he is. I moved to Dubai as a transition to Portugal, from a whole extended family support system to only one brother in Dubai, and he travels a lot. When I'm ready, I'll move to Portugal, where I know no one. Do you know what?
Do now. You do now.
Yeah. Well, Moaz, may I suggest that when you do come to Portugal, you stop by the Silver Coast and come and visit. You know, like we have expats like coming in all the time, and in fact today is one of our meetup days, you know, where we all meet up and welcome people and all share our experiences. So I think those kinds of journeys are actually very useful. I mean, that's the journey I was on when I met you, wasn't it? Didn't know anyone in Bali and just go on a plane, and isn't it? It's
stepping out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm all for that, Moaz. Well done.
Good. Yes, indeed.
So you were talking about, you know, like the ego and just how kind of insidious it is, really. I've noticed with this like recent sort of heart opening that's going on, you know, there's a lot of people saying, I'm really feeling a lot of stuff at the moment. And I've noticed a lot of people are really getting to core issues. Like, you know, you were talking about getting to the absolute cause of your judgment. A lot of people, and it might just be another layer, obviously, and it could get even more insidious. But I caught myself out in a judgment where I was saying, God, people have it so much easier than me about a particular thing. And I remember being in that frame of mind when I met you, actually, you know, in terms of relationships. Some people have it so much easier and I have to try so much harder. And you know, at a sort of like everyday level, when you say something like, I have to try harder than other people, it makes you sound like a goddamn hero, doesn't it? And, you know, when I say that, I really feel like, wow, I really do go to a lot of effort to help or support or whatever. And I create all these different reasons as to why I'm so good and why it's so much harder for me. And actually, when I explored that fully, I was so shocked by the implications of holding that judgment and why it might irritate people. Because to believe that somehow I've got it harder and I have to try harder and other people have it easier is a very passive aggressive way of putting down other people's achievements, of not
Yes.
celebrating the good that has arrived in my brother and sister. It's a way of separating myself and making myself special for failing by my own expectations. And I was so shocked by that. But it's, all of these kinds of things where we're really getting down to deeper judgments are really coming out. And I'm noticing as well, as you might, that whatever's going on in the media at the moment is whipping up such a huge frenzy. I've not felt anything like this before, I don't think, where one minute you can define a woman, the next you're talking about women's rights, the next you're talking about something else, and it's like one thing after another, after another, after another. And people's heads it almost feels like there's a vice around our heads. And it's like, this because our ego's being triggered right now, and that externally the outside world is reflecting that back to us? Or, how does it all work?
Yeah. Well, humanity is sorry, say again.
Is that true from your perspective? Because that might not be true. That's just how I'm seeing it right now.
I'm seeing this, and this is perpetuated through the media, and it's really growing a cloud of fear, that people are fearful of COVID, they're fearful of Russia, they're fearful of war, they're fearful of this, they're fearful of lots of things, and it's quite normal, right?
Yeah.
Except what's not normal is that we're being fed this narrative. We are. Yeah. There is a conscious effort to keep people in fear because they're much easier to control.
Yes.
So yes, there is a concerted effort to spread a lot of fear about everything, right? And that, of course, is then triggering the ego's fear. So in essence, if the person that triggers us is a gift, because what they've done is they've helped us shine the light on what needs to be resolved for us.
Yeah.
And this media campaign, this programming and narrative is causing people to look inwards, not everybody, but look inwards and say, what is this fear? Right?
Yeah.
And the most common one is the fear of death. Human beings tend to fear death. And that's been programmed, especially Western. It's very different here in Bali. It's very different in some Eastern countries where death is accepted, death is part of life. But we have, in the West, we have a rather macabre perspective on death because we have disconnected from our true realm, our true authenticity, and our true core, which is unaffected by anything and doesn't die. Right?
Yeah.
It can't die. It's infinite. Right. So as we reconnect to that core, the fear drops away, and we realize it's just like a spacesuit we're wearing, and we just step out of it. And the most beautiful metaphor for that is the snake that hooks its tail onto a rock and then pulls out of the old skin, refreshed, renewed, regenerated, and the old skin just lies there. And I pick them up. We have about a meter long one that arrives fairly regularly. And that's the metaphor. The old skin that I'm holding, showing my kids, that says, this will be how you'll view your old body after you pass away. It was just a skin. What's inside is untouched by all that is going on. So what's the answer? Becoming more conscious, becoming more aware of who we are at the core. And none of that fear then can touch us. We can have momentarily aspects of fear, but generally in our lives, we become fearless. It's a nice place to be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And you are right. It is all about death and dying at the moment, which is the most instinctive fear of all.
Yes.
The fear for our survival. Yeah, you're right. Viruses, vaccines, war, babies. it's all about death and dying at the moment.
Yes. Yeah. And the irony is that if you look at the levels of consciousness in a pyramidal shape, survival is right down the bottom.
Yeah.
Right down the bottom. Right? So this is where one is in a desperate mode to stay alive. Right? That there are extreme threats to our survival, and we are calling on any resources possible to stay alive. And there's nothing wrong with that impetus, except for when we're stuck in there in a chronic case of survival, we're not moving up the pyramid of consciousness into transformation, which is about the middle. And then we get right up the top, which is being of selfless service to others. So we're no longer just trying to put food on the table. We are in a position where we could be of service. Doesn't mean to say you're wealthy. The wealth is in the heart. That's the true wealth.
Yes, because I guess if you find yourself in that stage, you feel like you have enough, you are enough, and that everything is love and abundance.
Yes.
That's such a resourced place to be in. And from word go, definitely in the Western society, we're brainwashed and conditioned out of that belief. We are, from our parents, we learn that we're not enough or there isn't enough. It's very difficult to be unconditional. I think it is natural to be unconditional, but I don't think we've been unconditional for a long time. I love that a lot.
It's not a common trait.
No.
So coming back to who's driving. So it can be the ego, which is based in fear. So that's the main driver and has all these subsets. So why do we have an ego, and what purpose does it serve? So the answer is the ego is to show us what we don't want, right? What we don't want in life. I don't want to be this angry person. I don't want to be upset. I don't want to be fighting. I don't want to be sabotaging myself. Now we arrive at that point, we ask the question, what do I want? And the opposite, what the ego is for me, as it arises, it's giving me the gift of choice. The ego says, come down this path of fear with me, right? And then I consciously make a choice to go down the path of love. So there's the two opposites. The ego gives us a choice of where we want to go. So now we can get in the driver's seat of love and drive our life from a heartfelt point of being, right? And the heart, of course, is the portal to this infinite consciousness. So all the time that we're in the head, in the ego, we're moving further and further away from our core entity, identity. And when we move into our hearts, we start coming into alignment. The head and the heart start coming into alignment. And that's when the magic happens. And we've talked about the 6 heart virtues in the past, of appreciation and compassion and understanding and forgiveness, humility.
Gratitude. Is that there as well? Gratitude? I can't remember. Or is that
Sorry?
forgiveness? Is gratitude there?
Gratitude and appreciation, number one.
Oh, yeah.
They're all equal. And then you're coming around the circle, you've got forgiveness, forgiving ourselves and others, humility, being humble, and bravery and courage. And those are everyday words. It's the embodiment and living of those elements. And all those 6 heart virtues equate to love. They are acts of love given towards ourselves and others. So it's really is very simple. It's not rocket science. We've got to take the hero's journey from the head to the heart, right? And then we open the heart up to love, and love has those 6 qualities about it that if we practice them on ourselves, we will have more love to give to others and then give that love away. And then that beautiful cycle just grows bigger and bigger. And this is what's happening on this planet at the moment. The pioneers are there building heart-centered processes, procedures, intentional communities, regenerative agriculture, gentle birth, new financial systems, new ways of governance. All of those are coming from the heart because they're encompassing. And it's the cooperation and collaboration as opposed to competitiveness, competition. So we're in this process. So it's no wonder that we're getting triggered, that we're dealing with this stuff, and this stuff is bombarding us. It's a gift. It's no fun going through it, right?
No,
as we can all attest.
I mean, even when you can see it's an absolute trick, to pull us in and to distract us, it's still no easy journey necessarily. But you are right; it is a gift because we are really seeing choice forced at us. With all these issues being boom, boom, boom in our face, we're having to. Well, I think the first level, and this is the thing that I'm really seeing at the moment, is a lot of people just go, yes, I'm this. Yes, I'm that. I'm for this. I'm for that. I'm for this. I'm for that. And then the implications of where that leads comes a little bit later, I think, when we realize that what we've identified with may be part of the problem or maybe another sort of like red herring. It's like you say, you're making the journey from head to heart, and it is an intuitive journey. It's a journey where we are processing the rationality that we've got, and kind of feeling and sensing our way forwards. I'm quite excited, like Mercury's retrograde. I don't normally celebrate it, to be fair, not because it's a bad thing, but because it's an everyday thing. It happens 3 to 4 times a year. But Mercury's gone retrograde in the sign of Gemini, and Gemini is the rationalist, and Mercury is the communicator. And when it goes retrograde, there appears to be this swelling of intuition. People are realizing that their rationalizations haven't necessarily led them to peace. In fact, they've just taken them closer to judgment. So I really love what you're talking about there. And I think it is important to see the gift of the media and the governments and whatnot. And also like the Agent Smiths that are coming up all over the place, from the Matrix. I saw somebody this morning just expressing something from her heart. And somebody just said, why are you posting this? Are you an anti-vaxxer? Or are you anti-abortion? Are you anti-science? Are you a climate denier? Are you a war denier? And it was like a whole, obviously they didn't do all of that, but it's that phrase that so many people have just been using because the media has used it over and over. Are you a and this kind of word, and we've got so used to saying it, and I think it's a lazy shorthand with lots of implications and traps. It's like a booby trap, isn't it?
Yes.
Because like most people want to then fight the label that's put on them rather than actually have an open conversation, which is really what's needed.
Yes.
It's all about conversation.
It's sort of pigeon, and again, it's ego driven. It's about the divide and conquer. You're either in one camp or the other, right? You can't sit on the fence, right? And if you're in the opposing camp to me, then I've got to oppose you and degrade you and call you all sorts of horrible names and wipe you off as a human being because you don't have the same perspective as me, right? And we're seeing this in rampant throughout our societies, right? The USA is Republican and Democrat. We've got fighting between gay and straight, Muslims and Christians,
men and women,
men and women, vaxxed and unvaxxed. If only we would wake up to realize we're being played here, right? Because the old ancient warfare is to divide and conquer. Divide your enemy into 2 groups, and it's easier to conquer them. And we're being played, and most people are not aware of it.
And then people are being divided down even more. Because I noticed somebody very recently, somebody that I've been connected with through the times when I went to your wonderful shop for those like enlightening evenings. So somebody I met there who's very, very vocal about abortions at the moment, and it's just describing anything in the womb as just being a seed and not having any consciousness. And I was really surprised by it to have been connected with somebody so long who talks about equal opportunities, love, equality, consciousness, all across the board. And then all of a sudden on this one issue, it's really bizarre. And I felt very triggered by that. And I thought, I'm going to write a smart answer. No, I'm going to write a loving answer. And I spent ages writing something. And I thought, no, I'm just going to unfollow him. And I thought, he doesn't need to know how I feel. It's not his business to know how I feel. And I felt so much better for that. But I was very surprised by that, because you think that if somebody almost has allegiance to spirituality or allegiance to this, that they will be across the board about every single view that you hold. And it's just not true. But these sweeping generalizations that we've, had, told to us that this is how it is. You're either far right or you're far left. It's not true. Most of us are in the middle, and we're getting really thrown around.
Yes. So the answer is to drop the label and just define ourselves simply as we're human beings first.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what our sexual preference is, what our political alignment with, whatever. We're human beings first, and we're all part of the one human family. So same color blood comes out of every race on the planet. So if we can find that commonality, it's what I call finding the triune, right? So the triune of hot and cold is temperature. Right? Because if I say temperature, it doesn't imply that it's hot or cold or warm or chilly. It's just temperature. It's neutral, and it has no leaning either way. So looking for that triune, there's hot, there's cold. The triune is the word temperature. Now, if we can look at the triune of the many triunes of human beings, men and women, African and Indian, all these dualities and labels, and we can bring them together and say, first and foremost, we're human beings.
Yeah.
And why would I want to harm another human being, another brother or sister? And that is the root. That's coming from the heart. That's not feeding one side or the other, which is more duality and more oppositional perspective, but finding a neutral. And it's the classic one is, let's agree to disagree, right? Two perspectives. And the triune of that is, let's agree to disagree. End of story. There's no argument after that. So looking for the triune there within circumstances. And I think I find great solace in that when I consciously look for that every time, right? And it gives me solace because it brings us back to being centered. Not the pendulum has been swinging and now it's slowed down and it's centered. Right? And that's what we need to be: centered, grounded, authentic, real, loving, infinite human beings. This is who we are. And these other aspects, we are the yin yang symbol. All these aspects occur for sure, but the yin yang symbol, those two sides brought together, make up a complete circle, and the circle represents wholeness. That's the triune of the yin yang symbol, leading us to wholeness.
Oh, I love that. That sounds so good. And of course, and it probably won't be a huge surprise, but like when I was 16, I wanted to study philosophy. I loved it so much, and so I chose to do that at school. And one of the things that we spent a lot of time looking at was, I'm trying to think of the ethics and morality, the sacredness of life, the sanctity of life issues, I guess. And we were talking about the Hegelian dialect, like where you're talking, you have a thesis, a starting point, and an antithesis, and then you have the synthesis. And so you're talking about like the triune, you're getting to that place of center. And of course, that place of center becomes the new thesis. For an antithesis to fall from, because we're always, even when the pendulum stops, it becomes a new starting place for something else to react.
Yes.
And so it is part of this sort of like moving. I remember when I met you, you were talking about, you were saying to me that when things stop moving or stop growing, it is almost like the same as death. You start dying. Like when you stop, I mean, you probably put it in a much better way. And I've thought about this over and over for like the last 12 years and have reduced it with my own shorthand. But my learning from you that I took from you 12 years ago was that when we stop growing and stop thriving and stop moving, stop being flexible, we're kind of desiccating in our judgments or in our bodies or in our mind, like a plant does. Plants are supple. Even trees, that have a very like solid trunk, they are still moving. They're still kind of breathing. And the opposite of breathing is not breathing. It's like dying. And so, you see plants dry up and then they become part of the cycle of life. I mean, they already are, but they, renew themselves. And it's the same with us. The moment we start being too rigid in our thinking, we're drying up.
Yes.
We're not really growing.
Yeah, exactly. I think the analogy I use is water, a body of water, a pond in the garden. If there's no movement in it, we have koi ponds here, as you remember.
Yeah.
We have little pumps to circulate the water and aerate the water so the fish become alive. But a pond of water left still will become dead. It'll become stagnant. Algae will grow over it, all right, and it won't contain life. And that's a replication of the body. In totality, we have 60% water. Some elements are about up to 90% water, but on average, 60% water in the body. If we're not moving this body with some form of movement, then it's easy to get stagnant and lifeless, i.e. the couch potato. Right? And the opposite of that is the yoga expert who's moving all the time and creating this energetic flow because everything is in motion. The universe, the multiverse, the earth around the sun, the earth spinning around itself, the atoms, the protons, everything is in motion. There is even the still water is still in motion at an atomic, subatomic particle level. So it really is impossible for something to stop completely, right?
Yeah.
But the least amount of movement starts to take away the life force. It's why we feel good when we walk in nature or we jog or do a bit of exercise or whatever it is. Why do we stretch in the morning?
Oh, I love that.
Our dog is a yoga specialist. She does down dog every morning.
Yeah, of course. I actually before I came live on air, I went out to welcome our chickens. They were stretching their wings. They wanted to like get out of their cage for the night. And I went down and fed them and gave them a little stroke. I love that. But yeah, you're right. It's the movement,
Yes.
and the stagnation. Yeah, you're right. The stagnation isn't death, but it's transforming, isn't it?
Yes.
If you stagnate in your life force, it's going to transform into something else because life persists.
Yes. Well, what is death but a lack of breath, isn't it? All death results from a lack of breath. We stop breathing. The heart stops beating, and then the body is lifeless. If you've seen any bodies on a slab, and I've seen more than I'd like to see in this lifetime, there is no life. There is no being occupying that structure. right?
Mhm.
But if you put it in the ground, all the critters and the bugs will come in, and that will take it and transform it into food or part of their accommodation or whatever, compost.
Yeah.
So there's a complete cycle going on there. There is always movement.
Yeah, there is. I love
And
that.
if we're not, the lovely thing about meditation and contemplation and moving exercise like Tai Chi,
Mm.
yoga, the lovely slower ones, anybody can do those, and they're really good for older people. But it's just making the effort to move this body, and it brings about a youthfulness, and from that, a usefulness. So,
Yeah, I love that.
yeah, yeah.
That's lovely. Yes, I love that so much, so very much. So we started this like looking at what's driving us and the ego and the authentic self. We've spoken about quite a lot in this. A lot's come up. Is there anything that we've left out, do you think? Because you run a course on this, don't you? You've just launched an online course. Do you want to tell me about that?
Yes,
Or
it's called the ego and the authentic self, not or. So
oh,
I make
sorry.
it very. I'm
Okay. Yeah.
very cautious of making it and the. You see,
Yeah.
because the ego and the authentic self make up the whole, right?
Yeah.
And only when we bring those two sides together, and can we become whole. If
Yeah.
we're I don't want this ego, I don't want this shadow stuff, I don't want this trauma from the past, but we're just pushing it away, ignoring it, denying it, trying to stomp it away. Just give me the white side of the yin yang symbol. So social media is taking over there, right?
Yeah.
It's addictive. To We get a dopamine hit from um, all the likes that we have and how many followers and all of that. So we get addicted to these things: television programs, serials, Netflix, you name it, food. um, all these things are addictive, and they're drawing us away from this direct self inquiry
Mm-hmm.
and drawing us away from bringing these two halves of the yin yang symbol together so that we can be whole. And
Yeah.
we can be authentic and real. All right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're not being authentic. Oh, you're really good. I'm blissed out all day, every day. No, you're not.
We've met people like that, haven't we?
We have. It's called spiritual bypassing. And
Mm.
given that people are at least making an effort,
Yeah.
right, rather than a judgment from myself, people are making an effort. It's an
Or a laugh
observation,
from me.
and it's better doing that than breaking the law somewhere or
Mm.
harming somebody.
Yeah.
So we're all on this path, and some are beginning the path, some are halfway along, and some are romping over the hills into the unknown future.
Mm.
And we're all in this together as a human family.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Okay.
Mm.
Where do you think this conversation is going to lead to us to next week? You know, where should we pick this up from next week?
Next week's in the future, and I prefer to stay in present time. So we'll think of something appropriate. Just see
Okay.
what happens, what's transpiring in the world next week that we can shine the light of consciousness
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
to give some tools or
Yeah.
another perspective on it that your viewers and listeners can hopefully get something from.
Yeah.
Take a takeaway.
Fantastic. Great. Well, I'm going to draw this to a close, and hopefully you'll stay behind so I can have a little chat and a catch up.
Yes, sure.
I just want to thank everyone that's joined us today. And, you know, if you're joining us and it's not live, thank you so much. I hope you find this useful. Rick and I do this quite regularly, usually every week, but not always. But, you know, we are committed to having these wonderful conversations. And if there's anything that you'd like us to pick up and talk about, then please do just send us an email. My email's louisa.tan@munson@gmail.com. And in fact, if you look below in the show notes, you'll see all of the different ways of contacting us. If somebody wants to attend your wonderful course, your online course, how can they reach you, Rick?
Probably best if I give you the link so we can put it in the link here. That's probably the best thing. Yes.
Okay, I'll add those links
Humanities Team and Udemy. So
okay.
let me send you the links to that, and people, if they want to explore it, there's some free videos there to get a taste of, is this what I want or need, and take it from there. No obligation.
Fantastic. Excellent. We've just got one last comment from Moaz saying, thank you, Louisa and Rick. Love you both. Oh, thank you very much.
You are loved too, Moaz. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I'll see you about the same time next week then, Rick. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.